everyone, it's Lynnea for LDRS Creative, and this video is all about the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. I'm going to start by showing you everything that comes in this kit, and then we'll make 12 cards using the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. So to get started, this kit has just about everything you need to make 12 cards. You just need to add adhesive. There are 12 envelopes that fit the A2 cards, and then there are also 12 A2 card bases as well. Next up, there are 12 A2 sized pattern papers, and these pattern papers are double-sided, so you're going to get two each of the 6 designs, but since they're double-sided, there are 12 total patterns. And I love that these are double-sided because on one side there's a more bold pattern like this one with the stripes, and on the reverse side there's a softer pattern, a similar shade of that brown but with a distressed look. Then again, with all of these pattern papers you're going to have a more bold pattern and then one that can be used as a soft background. The colors here are just gorgeous. There's pinks, soft browns, and also a minty or sage green color. So these are all a muted color palette, perfect for autumn. And I love each and every one of these colors and each pattern. So don't forget that they are double-sided so you can mix and match your patterns and you won't have a single repeating pattern if you don't want to across all 12 of your cards. There are also 12 die-cut toppers, and there are 2 each of 6 different designs, and there are different shapes as well. So this one has a more pointy rectangle design, and then there's a more rounded rectangle design. And each of these are beautiful and elegant, and there's a different little critter with some pumpkins and different autumn scenery on each one. Now the third shape is kind of a fancier rectangle, so there's 3 different styles of topper, 6 different designs, and 2 each of each design, a total of 12 die-cut toppers. There's also die-cut ephemera included in the Autumn Tails kit. There are ribbons, and there's 2 different designs of ribbons, and then there are some pumpkins, and then there are also matching character ephemera that match the die-cut toppers. You're going to get a total of 12 printed sentiments, and they are printed on 3 sheets of A2 paper. So if you want to, all you have to do is take your trimmer and trim these straight across, and you're going to have sentiment strips that are perfect to fit across each of your A2 cards, or you can die cut them if you want. Now, like I said, the Autumn Tails Card Making Kit has just about everything you need to make your cards. You need to just bring in your adhesive. So I'll use some liquid adhesive here and there. And then I also have my standard 1/16 inch thick foam tape. And I also have this double thick. This is 1/8 inch thick foam tape. So I'll hold them both up here and you can see the difference. The 1/8 inch is double thick as the 1/16 inch, and I will use both of these. So let's go ahead and start making card number 1. I have a card base, a pattern paper, a die-cut topper, a sentiment, and then I have some ephemera as well. I chose the matching mouse that's going to go right on top of that die-cut topper, and then also a ribbon banner. I'm going to use my liquid adhesive to add my adhesive to the back of the pattern paper and glue that right onto the A2 card base. Both of these, the base and the pattern paper, are both sized at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so all I have to do is just line up those corners and stick that down. Now the die cut topper here is the little mouse with the pumpkin, and like I said, I chose the die cut ephemera that matches that background. And here's what I'm going to do for each and every one of my cards. I'm just going to kind of lay out my elements so I get an idea of where I want to go, and then I'll start building and fixing things up. So I cut down one of the sentiment sheets into just a straight line, and you could leave that if you want to, but I wanted to make this a banner edge. So to do that, I'm cutting just about equal lengths off of each side so that I have just a little bit of a buffer space on the left and right side of the sentiment. Then I'm going to use my scissors to cut a straight line up the center, and then I will cut from the corner to the edge of that cut line from each of the corners. So again, cutting up the center, and then from the edge to the center, and then I'll flip that over and go from the other edge to the center, and that is the easiest way I know to create a banner for your sentiment. No die needed, just some scissors. So from here, I already have my topper. I know I want that right in the center of my card. I'm going to pop up that matching mouse ephemera, and then I have my banner, and I'm going to put my sentiment on top of the banner. Now here's where I use my double thick foam tape, because I wanted to put this little mouse character right on top of that background. And you can do this with each of your cards if you want. There's matching ephemera for each of your die cut toppers. And then I'm just going to add my ribbon. I'm using some liquid adhesive there. I don't need that popped up. Then I'm going to pop up my sentiment on top of the ribbon. And then I will use foam tape behind that entire die cut topper and add that onto the center of my A2 card. And I'm using double thick foam tape here too. I used a mix of the double thick and the regular thickness foam. My sentiment is just the regular thickness because I wanted my character ephemera to be popped up higher than my sentiment. So here's my first card, all finished. Isn't it super adorable? I just love this Autumn Tails card kit. Here's my second card. I'm going to be creating these kind of in pairs. So this one, I'm using that same die cut topper and the same die cut ephemera piece, that mouse with the little pumpkin, but I'm going to be using the other ribbon. There's two ribbon designs, so I'm going to use the other ribbon, a different sentiment, and a different pattern paper, and I will kind of rearrange these elements across my card to show you how you can use the same topper, so it's the same scene, but get a different look. So again, I'm going to start by taking my pattern paper and adhering that onto my card base. I'm just adhering that flat. You could cut this down if you wanted to create a border, but I'm going to just use that pattern paper so that it goes edge to edge on my card design. You saw me before kind of lay out all my pieces, and you will see me do that with every single one of my cards. That is a trick that I do with just about every card that I make, whether or not I'm using a card kit or not. I like to take my elements, be them stamps, die cut images, ephemera pieces. I lay them down on my card, get a good idea of where I want things to go before I start assembling. That way I know that I like where I'm headed. So for this card, I kind of want that banner to peek out from behind the die cut ephemera piece. So I'm going to glue that down first using my liquid adhesive. I'll put that right down onto that die cut topper. You wiggle that around until I get that where I want it to be. Then I'll use foam tape behind the mouse and the pumpkin ephemera piece and pop that up right on top. My sentiment, I'm going to tuck behind the little mouse, so I'm trimming some down from the left side of that sentiment edge so that it can kind of tuck in and butt right up against the little mouse's head, and it's going to peek out so that it just looks like a cohesive line going across my card. Then I'll glue that down and trim off the excess that's hanging off the edge of my card. So here's the first two cards I made with the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit using that same die cut topper and die cut ephemera, but you can see how I switched up the placement as well as the background papers. One is more of a muted background and one is more bold background pattern. So I have two cards that are totally different using the same pieces from this kit. Let's move on to cards 3 and 4, where you'll see that I'm going to do about the same thing here. I've again chosen my pattern paper, my die cut topper, my banner, my matching ephemera piece, and my sentiment. And I'm going to again just adhere this pattern paper down to my card base, again going edge to edge, but remember that you could cut this down if you want to. This time though, I'm going to create a landscape style card instead of a portrait. I wanted to have these stripes going horizontally. I love a good horizontal stripe. Then I'm just going to take my pieces, lay them down on my card, and play around with the design. I put my topper off to the left side. I have the banner kind of going straight across that little scene. Then my matching ephemera piece on top. And I'm going to line up my sentiment so that it fits in between a few of those stripes. That just looks pleasing to the eye to me. Once I'm sure that this is how I want my card to be laid out, I'm going to start adding some foam adhesive behind some pieces and adhering them together. This banner, I'm going to use my liquid adhesive and glue that down flat. The liquid adhesive gives me just a minute or two to kind of wiggle that around and make sure that I have that placed perfectly. Then I'll use foam tape behind the little bunny with the pumpkins and add that onto my die cut topper. My sentiment I'm going to adhere next because I want that to tuck behind the topper. So I added some foam tape, placed that so that the right side of the sentiment is near to the right edge of my card. Then I used my scissors just to trim off the edge, nothing fancy there. And then I'm going to use foam tape to add that die cut topper towards the left side of my card so that everything looks cohesive and everything's going to fit all in that card space. Here's finished card 3 from the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. I love this one. Okay, card 4 I'm using, again, almost the same pieces. I do have a different pattern paper and a different sentiment and the alternate banner, but I'm keeping with that same die cut topper design. And I'm going to show you again how you can use the same scene to create a different style card. I have my background paper down and I'm playing around with my pieces once again just to make sure that I have them lined up how I want them. And as I was playing around, my banner kind of tucked on top of my sentiment strip, and I thought that would be really cute instead of tucking it behind to kind of have those banner edges overlapping and coming in front of that sentiment a little bit. So I liked that design. I'm going to glue that banner behind my sentiment piece, but tuck those banner edges on top and secure that with a little bit of liquid adhesive from the front and then foam tape from the back so that I can work with that as one piece instead of the sentiment strip and the banner. So I added some little dots of adhesive on the front, and then here I am just kind of placing my foam tape so that it overlaps both the sentiment strip and the banner so that that's going to be one piece now instead of two. I find that easier to do to kind of wiggle things around and get things the way I want them to be, and then use my adhesive to secure them in place so I don't have to mess with it after. I know that I want my topper to be in the background, and then my sentiment and banner, and then my matching ephemera piece on top. So I'm layering them together on the card in that order. And before I press anything down, I'm going to be able to lift things up and move them around if I need to. The last thing I do for my cards is to add pressure and press that adhesive into place. So here's the last bit, just adding that little bunny ephemera on top. And here are the two cards I made with this same die cut topper, but again, they are very different cards just by switching up the layout and the background papers as well as the sentiment. All right, let's pick up with cards 5 and 6. Now I am switching over to this little fox with the rounded rectangle topper design. And I love this fox with this long coat and the little pumpkins. They're so cute. This time though, I have two pieces of ephemera. I have the fox, and then I also grabbed a pumpkin. And although the pumpkin does not match this die cut ephemera, nobody's going to know because I'm going to pop that up right on top and it's going to look cohesive. So again, I'm doing what I've done with the previous cards where I have my pattern paper, my die cut topper, and then I have my ephemera and my sentiment as well as my banner, and I'm going to play around with the placement, lay them down, kind of tuck them in front and behind and see what I like before I go ahead and add my adhesive and start adhering things to my card. Once I know that I like it, I have gone ahead and I've added adhesive behind the fox die cut ephemera, and I'm going to add that right on top of my die cut topper for extra dimension. And then I'm going to grab more foam adhesive and stick that behind this pumpkin, which again does not exactly match this die cut piece, but that's okay. Nobody's going to know except for you and me. I added that on top of the die cut pumpkin, and then I'm just going to play around here with my sentiment. And I know I want my sentiment to go down, and then I think I want my little banner piece to kind of be in front of the sentiment just a little bit. So I'm going to add foam adhesive where I need to add some support, and then some liquid adhesive right at the top edges of that banner just to make sure that that is secured in all places. So this is my 5th card with the Autumn Tails Card Making Kit. For my 6th card, I thought that I would again try another horizontal arrangement, and I have that same die cut topper, the matching fox ephemera, the other ribbon than what I used on the first card, and I have a different sentiment as well. I repeated that same banner making process that I did on one of my first cards, but this time I only needed to flag one end because I'm going to tuck the right side of that sentiment behind my die cut topper. I laid things out just like I have been doing to kind of get an idea of placement. I thought it would be fun to have the ribbon banner go diagonally across the topper, so I went ahead and added that with some liquid adhesive. Then I put foam tape behind the matching fox ephemera piece and popped that up. I added the banner over to the left with my regular layer of foam tape, and then I used the double thick layer behind the die cut topper so that that would pop up even higher than my sentiment banner. And all of that I'm adhering onto one of the A2 pattern papers, which is already on my A2 card base. So here are cards 5 and 6 with the Autumn Tails Card Making Kit. And again, you can see how switching up the pattern papers and the arrangement of the elements gives you two completely different cards, even though you're using the same icon ephemera. Let's go ahead and dive into cards 7 and 8. We're past the halfway point of this card making kit. And this time I wanted to show you that you can use your dies to cut down the sentiments. So far I've been using my paper trimmer to trim them into strips and then maybe even flagging the edges with scissors. But I wanted to show you that you can use your dies. So in this case I used my rounded rectangle frame dies and found one that would perfectly fit around the sentiment and just die cut that out using my die cutting machine. I have an A2 pattern paper already adhered onto my card base, and then I'm going to play around with the placement for my banner ephemera, my sentiment die cut, as well as the die cut topper, and then I have the matching fox ephemera, and I also grabbed some pumpkin ephemera to kind of build up this scene a little bit. I think I have 2 pieces of pumpkin ephemera, which each one has multiple pumpkins, so it's going to look like a whole line of pumpkins like she's standing in a pumpkin patch. I went ahead and played around with the arrangement, and once I got it the way I liked, I'm going to start using my mix of liquid and foam adhesive to start adhering things down onto the card. So I went ahead, I have my sentiment and my banner down. I'm going to add my little character ephemera on top. And unfortunately, that is where my video camera footage went all wonky. So I had to cut that part out because it was unviewable. But I will show you that completed card in just a moment here. This is my next card that I'm using with the same ephemera piece. And I have already adhered that banner onto the die cut topper. Like I said, I've lost a good chunk of my footage here and I do apologize for that. But I think that it'll be easy to see that I added that pattern paper onto my card base and then I just built it up with the die cut topper just like I have been doing before. I added that ribbon down and then I have the fox ephemera and then a little pumpkin, and then I have a sentiment that I also die cut using that same rounded rectangle die set. It's just a different shape to fit the size of this sentiment. So here are both of those fox cards, and you can see that I used the fox ephemera, and here are the pumpkins all built up in front of the fox so that it looks like they're standing in a pumpkin patch. And then this one I used just a single pumpkin. So again, 2 totally different cards using just about the same pieces. Here's a little bunny in the pumpkin patch, and this time I'm going to go with a different striped pattern, and I will add that pattern paper onto my card base. I have a sentiment that I just cut straight across using my paper trimmer. Again, it's going to be the perfect width for an A2 card in the portrait format. I played around with some placement and layered things down, and then I'm just going to start using my adhesives and adding things to my card. I again wanted to have that banner kind of near the bottom of my scene, so I used liquid adhesive, and you can see me there just kind of wiggling it around until I get it perfectly placed. Then I'll add some foam tape behind my die cut ephemera, and pop that right up on top of the printed ephemera that's on the die cut topper. Now, as I'm going through making this, I wanted to kind of talk about how you could stretch your card kit. The Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit makes 12 cards. There's 12 bases, 12 papers, 12 toppers, all included in this kit. But as you can see, what I've done so far is taken the matching die cut ephemera, this little bunny with the pumpkins here, and I have put that on top of the die cut topper. If you wanted to, you could trim these pattern papers down to make them go even further, and you could take the die cut ephemera and use that completely separately from the die cut topper. So instead of layering them on top of each other, you could actually probably make double the cards than the 12 cards this kit is intended to make, just by stretching things, cutting things down, and kind of thinking outside of the box, maybe even bringing in some stamps or other background elements from your stash. So here's the matching card that goes with the other one I just made, except this time I'm going to bring in even more pumpkin ephemera. My favorite part of fall, I love apple picking and going to the pumpkin patch. So having these extra pumpkin die cut pieces made me so happy to add to the cards. Again, I've gathered all of my elements, and then I've just laid them out on my card base so that I can see how things are going to look. And once I've decided that yes, that is how I want things to go, I'll even sometimes snap a picture with my cell phone in case I get interrupted or in case I forget right where I had things. But then I'll start adding my foam adhesive, and I'll even use liquid adhesive here and there just to make sure that things are adhered properly. And then I'll just add them onto my card and start building things up. So I have already adhered that die cut topper onto my pattern paper. I have my ribbon, and now I'm adding my die cut ephemera and my sentiment. And here are the two cards with the bunny and the pumpkin patch. Again, totally different, even though the images are the same. By mixing up those pattern papers and the sentiment and the location of all the elements, you get two completely different cards. Now we're going to move on to the last cards with the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. I saved this little mouse for last because I just love him and his big goofy ears. I think he's super adorable. I have a pattern paper, a die cut topper, a ribbon ephemera piece, and then I have a sentiment, and then I have the ephemera that's going to match the die cut topper, as well as some extra pumpkins. I'm going to again just lay everything down and play with placement and kind of get everything where I want before I start adhering. The sentiment strip I'm keeping as is. I just trimmed that straight across using my paper trimmer. I trimmed that off of one of the printed sentiment sheets. The ribbon I'm going to just stretch across the top of that, and then I'll pop up the matching ephemera piece on top of that die cut topper. And then I'll use foam tape to adhere all of that onto my pattern paper that I've already used my liquid adhesive to add onto an A2 card. I'd like to kind of tuck things behind each other. I think that just kind of looks pleasing to my eye at least. So I'm going to tuck this sentiment in the banner up underneath that character ephemera piece. And so this is my finished card number 11. Now we're going to move on to card 12, the last card from the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. And this is where I'm going to show you how you can kind of alter your elements a little bit. And we're not going to do a whole lot of altering, but I'm going to take one of these pattern papers and chop it in half. I'm eyeballing it, no measurements, just chopping it in half-ish using a diagonal line and my paper trimmer. And you can see how just having this will already, if you cut your papers in half either on a diagonal or horizontally or vertically, you're going to double the amount of pattern papers you have in your kit. I chose to cut my paper diagonally just because it's less precise, but this design would work whether you're cutting it in half either vertically or horizontally as well. Now you could leave this as is, but I love spattering my cards. So I took my black watercolor paint, added some water, and then I'm just using a size 4 round brush. I'm holding it with my left hand and tapping it with my right until I have the amount of spatter that I want onto my card. Then I'll clean my brush and I'll set that aside. It only takes a minute or two to dry because there's not a whole lot of paint on the card. Now, whenever I have a pattern paper that's meeting a solid color, I like to add what I call a finishing line. And this is a skippable step. You don't have to do this. This is optional. But I cut a strip of white cardstock that's about 1/8 of an inch, and I just added that right along the seam line to create just a cohesive look. You could skip it, you don't have to, but I like that little finishing touch. Now that my background is dry, I'm going to start placing things just like I've done with the other 11 cards. So I have my die cut topper, I have my matching die cut ephemera, and then I have grabbed every last pumpkin that I have left over from all of my other 11 cards, and I'm going to put them all on this card so that it looks like this little mouse is standing in the biggest pumpkin patch you can imagine. I have a sentiment that I die cut using those rounded rectangle frame dies, and I'm going to play around with where I want that to go. I thought maybe at the bottom, maybe at the top, maybe hanging off the side, and that is what I landed on, was kind of hanging off the right hand side. Once I know that for sure, I'm going to start using my foam adhesive, and I'm just kind of building this up piece by piece, layering up my foam tape so that it looks like this little guy is just swimming in pumpkins. So I have him already adhered onto my card, and then I'm layering up a whole bunch of pumpkins, and I have my sentiment hanging off the top off towards the right. This is my finished card, and I'm going to bring in the coordinating or matching card that I used with that same die cut topper and die cut ephemera piece, where I left it as the kit kind of intended. I didn't bring anything else in, and you're going to be able to see the difference in this one here, which is absolutely adorable, love it, but then kind of taking some other supplies from your craft stash like some watercolor spatters and altering the pattern paper so that it looks totally different. And I do encourage you not just use your paper trimmer to cut the papers in half, but maybe use some background dies and shape dies to create different looks out of the pattern paper and stretch your card making kit even further. So that's it. We're going to take a peek at all 12 cards that I made using the Autumn Tails Cardmaking Kit. And as I'm flipping through, I really do encourage you to use this video to either recreate these cards exactly as I have done, or use it as a jumping off point for your own inspiration and just take this card kit and run with it. I really hope you guys love this one as much as I do. These characters, the ephemera, and the papers all work together so beautifully to create 12 autumn cards. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this video inspires you. I'll see you again really soon. Bye!